Well, Shalom Aleichem. Once again, welcome to the Superheroes of the Messianic Lifestyle broadcast. My name is Darryl Weinberg of the Light to the Nations Messianic Ministries, and we are broadcasting to you through the Messianic Lamb Network. And each week we interview someone who is walking this lifestyle out, just to be an encouragement to let you know that you're not alone in what God has shared with you about the need to be obedient to his commandments and live a lifestyle that's pleasing to him. Each week, we have the privilege of talking to someone who's been doing this for a while and has some interesting things going on. And this week, I have the absolute privilege of interviewing people who, for many in the Messianic movement, need no introduction whatsoever. But nonetheless, I would like to introduce to you Sam and Miriam Nadler. Shalom Aleichem, folks. Welcome.
Welcome, Shalom. Wonderful to be with you.
It is truly a pleasure. I had the opportunity to be with Sam at a conference he led back a few years ago in Tampa, Florida. It was my first time in Tampa, hopefully not my last. And we talked about what it was like to plant Messianic congregations, because that's a bit of a passion for yours, and you have written a number of books on it. You've been in this movement for quite a while.
Yes, actually, my wife and I have been partnering together in service for the Lord since when we got married in '73. But my wife has been involved years before, as she served the Lord in Israel, New York City, and then I suppose everything went off the cliff when she married me. But nonetheless, we're thankful that we have two wonderful sons, but only one is eligible if you're praying. And we've been involved in ministry together from the outset of, even before there was a Jews for Jesus, through Jews for Jesus, and then with other organizations as well. Yeah, we've been around for a little while.
So obviously you can tell by your accent you're from the Holy Land, New York.
Yes.
And but you live currently in, is it Charlotte, North Carolina?
That's correct. We're in the future promised land of Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a wonderful place for serving the Lord.
There's a lot of Messianic activity down there. And how long have you been there for?
We've been here since '89, technically. Yeah. Technically, I moved here a little earlier at the time in '88.
New York, yeah.
And then as a family, we moved down here permanently, I guess, end of '88, beginning '89. So we've been here for quite a while. I'm very thankful to the Lord. You know, quite frankly, I did not think I'd be here this long, and had made plans to go otherwise at some point, but the Lord made it very clear I was to stay here until further notice. I figured I must do something really bad or really good, because it's a delightful area. It's a wonderful area, but the Lord seems to be content with having me where he has me. So praise be his name.
Yeah, and not moving around makes life easier, doesn't it?
A little easier, you know. We're happy to serve him wherever and however, quite frankly. And you know, I keep my bags packed because I'm looking for the upper taker anyway. So yes, I'm ready if he wants to have something else for me to do, like move to Toronto to befriend a man like yourself, or whatever he would have me do. I'm happy to serve him. Yeah.
I'm actually in Niagara Falls now.
Oh, okay. Slowly I turn.
We went to the other side of the lake.
Okay, then. Well, welcome back. Okay.
And we're 15 minutes away from the border, and I haven't been able to cross it since we got down here because of all this Mishigasa that's been going on.
Yeah. It's
always we're hoping that's going to change soon, Baruch Hashem. But so, all right. So you got married in 1973. Miriam, you were involved in Jewish ministry even before that. So how did you two meet? And Tell us a little bit about, your experience with how Jews for Jesus got started, your experience with Chosen People Ministries. I mean, that's, you were there at a very, very exciting time.
Sure, ladies first.
Well, I accepted Messiah when I was 16 in high school and found myself at a college, Cedarville University in Ohio, and met someone there who knew that I needed to be discipled, because although I'd accepted the Messiah, I wasn't exactly living for him. And I came from a Gentile town and small town in Pennsylvania. I'm a Gentile for the Lord.
You are?
I am, yes. News. And so the guy I met in college, Arnold Fruchtenbaum, saw that I needed discipleship. And he has his own ministry now. He's been in the work a long time. He was a couple years ahead of me, but he discipled me. And as he discipled me, he challenged me to consider how Jewish people needed to hear the gospel. And he challenged me to study the Holocaust and Jewish history. And then I ended up going to this camp in the Pocono Mountains, Camp Sar Shalom, with this organization, mission, and then to Coney Island every summer. And then by the time I graduated with my teaching degree, I ended up moving to New York City. And I was trained under a guy named Moish Rosen. He had about 10 people that he would train for 6 months. And I ended up living in New York. And basically, I knew that God had called me to reach Jewish people when he used someone like myself, and I saw fruit. I saw Jewish women coming to faith. And I started teaching when I was 21. I was teaching this Bible study of a bunch of Jewish ladies. They would come. We had a building on 72nd Street in New York City, real near Lincoln Center. And these women would come and we would learn the Bible, and some would accept the Lord. It was really a fruitful time. And then I got the chance to be in Israel for a year, which was wonderful. And I got to study Hebrew and all that good stuff. Came back to New York.
So when were you in Israel?
What? When?
What year?
Oh, after the 67 war, before the Yom Kippur War. I was there in the sweet spot of about 71, 72. It was a wonderful time.
Okay.
And I hooked up with the OM team. We started a coffee house ministry that back in the days, that was good, and now they're back in fashion. But it was a wonderful time of ministry. And then I came back to New York City. And by that time, Moish Rosen had gone to San Francisco and wanted me out there. And that's where I met Sam. He was out in San Francisco. So I'll let him take it up from there.
Okay. Well,
right.
I grew up in the traditional Jewish home in New York, in Queens, New York. And I had a lot of relatives who died in the Holocaust. And so when I was very young, I had real questions about the reality of God in light of the Holocaust. And my family, nor my family nor my rabbi could explain it to me satisfactorily. And so after Bar Mitzvah, I gave up any pretense of religion. And in my teenage years, I lived as an atheist. When I served the United States in Vietnam, I came back from there and was living in California. And while I was out there, I ran into what was in my memory, at least, the first really born again people. I met Christians. They didn't have much to say to me, but these born again Christians I ran into in Northern California seemed to be a little different. I didn't know if I could trust them or not because they smiled too much. I didn't think anyone who smiled that much could be trustworthy. But they planted a seed. A seed got planted in my soul, which I disregarded. I couldn't care less about what they shared with me. But God was very gracious, and a seed of the good news came to fruition through a lot of different experiences. And so I came to faith January 10th, 1972. During that week, I was living in Moish Rosen's home, sleeping on his living room floor. and learning Bible. He was teaching me Bible all day long, memorizing scripture, and so I'm very thankful to him for that. But during that week, there was planning was going on for a wedding that was coming up. I'm not sure if you ever heard of a man who's with the Lord now, Baruch Goldstein, but he was getting married to Marcia that week. And Miriam came into town for the wedding. She was friends with Marcia. And so before there was a wedding, they had what they called a fellowship meeting. I was brand new, just a few days in the Lord, and I thought it was a party. It looked like a party, but they called it fellowship meeting. Okay. And there was this beautiful woman who was there, and I was quite taken with her. I didn't know what to say to her. I mean, I knew how to talk to women, but I was sure it was all wrong and bad. So I didn't know what to say to a godly woman. And so I asked her if when she goes back to New York after the wedding, she was serving the Lord in New York. And when she goes back to New York, she was with what became Chosen People Ministries at the time. This is before there was a Jews for Jesus, of course. And I asked her to tell my parents I'm alive. I had been out of touch with them because of my horrendous lifestyle. And so she said she would give them a call. And so that's the way we left it at that moment. I was, as I mentioned, I didn't know what it meant to be a believer, so I was hungry to learn. The second day I was saved, I was out on a street corner handing out good news literature with a big smile because I wouldn't know what to say to anyone. But I was sharing my faith, and the Lord was very gracious to me during that time. Right after that period, we started.
Let me interrupt.
Please.
So when I went back to New York, I called his dad and mom, and immediately they asked me to dinner. So I was in Manhattan, and I knew they were somewhere in Queens, and it turned out to be Yennevelt, Queens, Middle Village, which nobody knew about, and you had to take a couple of buses and a train, subway, a couple of buses to get there. So I got there and spent the evening and got to really minister to his mother.
Praise
his
God.
dad was not all that interested, but share literature with her, share the faith that of Messiah with her. And then the funny thing was, it got too late. It was after 9 o'clock, and
the buses stopped
running. So I ended up crashing on their living room couch, and so it was just a wonderful time because a few months later, his mom passed. We didn't know she had cancer at that point, and so that was a nice peek into her life. So.
Yeah, and I would just say to anyone who's listening right now, if you want to win your way into a man's heart, witness to his parents. That worked for Miriam. That was a good thing. But during that time, when she went back, we had started a music team. We were initially we were not very talented until Miriam came out and a few other people like Stuart Dowerman and etc. Steffi Rubin, of course.
So this is the beginning of Lamb.
No, we were Liberated Wailing Wall.
Yeah, Lamb was
right.
At the same time.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yes.
And so we had all kinds of strange names we're trying to come up with for this group. We knew we wanted to share the Messiah, and we knew music would get people's attention. So that's basically was our modus operandi, and we moved ahead accordingly. And just a ragtag group of ex-hippies, loving the Lord as such. Of course, Stuart added a lot of polish as a great pianist. And then Miriam.
He's a great songwriter.
Yeah. And then that summer, Miriam moved back out to West Coast. She was transferred to San Francisco. And so we actually served the Lord together at that time.
Yeah, we started dating almost.
Yeah. When I came back from my mother's funeral, as my wife mentioned, I was even more convinced to share the good news, because I recognize, with the heartbreak of my mother dying, as far as I could tell in unbelief, I don't know what the last thoughts were, of course. But nonetheless, I was highly motivated. During that time, the fall of 72, we were dating, and I was absolutely convinced this was the woman God had for me, which I praise God for. We then got married.
Okay, I want to.
Please. Yeah.
Okay, so this is for the ladies who might be listening, and you're looking for that husband, and you think your life isn't going to be complete, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I had in Israel and in Manhattan, I had a problem because I would always get crushes on guys and want to date, So then I came to the point, especially in Israel, where I said, Lord, I don't want to date anymore. If you want me to marry someone, please have that person know that I'm the one, and that person would come for me. Otherwise, I'm not interested, and I want to focus on ministering for you in your name, and there you go. So when Sam asked me to go out on a date, I told him I wasn't really interested. And so
she wasn't nearly that polite.
He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I have plans. I'm taking a Jewish class on music, and then I'm going to Berkeley, and I'm going to do folk dancing, Hebrew folk, Israeli folk dancing." And he says, "Oh, I love to folk dance." He was lying through his teeth, of course.
Afraid of the scare of Jewish folk dancing.
So the first Mayim step, I knew, okay. But that was our first date. And then
second date, I figured out that she didn't want to do much with me, but she liked to share the good news. So I asked her, can we go out and hand out literature, good news literature, like the movie lines, and see the movie? And so that was our second date. And then the third date, we went to go hand out literature. And I asked her, can we have, after we got hand out literature, can we have a cup of coffee together? And so she kind of rolled her eyes and said, okay. But that was our third date. Dropping her off, I figured 3 dates, that's got to be good enough. So dropping her off in you could see the ground through the floor of my VW Bug.
It was this little, it was a wreck.
And so I dropped her off, and I thought I should let her know, Miriam, you're going to marry me.
That's exactly what he said.
And she looked at me like I was insane. Now, both things can be true. And so that's when she went back in and prayed that evening. And the Lord brought back to mind that prayer she had in Israel about the man has to know that I'm the one for him. And that's when she cried out, oh, no, not Nadler.
I mean, it was all great.
Yeah.
But the Lord did answer my prayer. And so I would just like to encourage any women who are listening to know that God does answer our prayers. It might be not in our timing or in our way, but He'll answer. He's faithful.
He loves to answer prayer more than we want to pray.
Right. And
my wife and I, we first met, we were mutually introduced by a mutual friend. Joy Garmez, actually, was the one who introduced us. And we went salsa dancing our very first time that we met. That was our introduction.
We can double date one of these days.
What was that?
We can double date one of these days.
Absolutely, and we'll go. We'll go paint the town red or whatever it is. Okay, good. So this is the one, and you're now on the path to familyhood.
Yeah. We got married. We were on the Liberated Wailing Wall. And so we got married, and quite frankly, our first year of marriage was driving all over the place with 4 other people.
In a van.
It's kind of an interesting way to start a marriage.
Not recommended.
Difficult. It's a difficult situation. But the Lord was very gracious to us. We were able to serve during that time all the way until in 75, when we then accepted the call to open the branch of Jews for Jesus in New York City. And so we did that and had a team of people there and did evangelism and outreach. But Darryl, there was during that time when the Lord really spoke to my heart about discipleship. I was a young believer, as you can put the dates together. You realize I was only 3 years in the faith. And I came across what is called the Great Commission, go make disciples of all nations. And I wasn't sure what that meant. But I'm a sincere believer. I was sincere then. And I wanted to serve the Lord, whatever that means. I'd like to do that, Lord, but what's that mean? But I was intent to figure that out, because in the mission we were at the time, discipleship was considered something that the churches did. And our protocols at the time, policy, was that when people came to faith, we put them in a church somewhere. And I was becoming quite discouraged by that, because it didn't stick. I mean, the Jewish people didn't feel at home there, didn't feel comfortable.
We saw a lot of Jews coming to faith.
We did.
Yeah.
But Messianic congregations weren't really a thing.
That wasn't happening.
Right.
And so the churches couldn't make accommodations for the Jews. So I realized, and when God convinced my heart of discipleship, I wanted to now make disciples. So during that period of time, we had a lot of evangelism going on. And by the time we got to 1978, 79, we had a clandestine congregation of people we met with regularly. We were teaching them, loving them, pastoring them for all intents and purposes.
Right.
And so that was what we were doing. And when it was heard about, things changed at Jews for Jesus. And so we decided to leave Jews for Jesus in 79 in order to serve the Lord in some capacity as God would show us, so we can make disciples, Talmudim, of Jewish people come to faith, and others, quite frankly. And so we went to serve together with Chosen People Ministries. It became Chosen People Ministries. And they gave us the liberty to serve as the Lord had led us. And so we started right away doing not just outreach, evangelism, but discipleship and planting a congregation in Westchester. We had ministries going on in a number of different places. Manhattan, and remember Pennsylvania.
We went out there.
And so we had quite a bit going on, but the Lord really was blessing the work. And so we became more and more convinced of his calling. Chosen People Ministries asked me to be the New York City director initially, and then the Northeast regional director. And I recruited a bunch of planters, wonderful men of God, and we were planting congregations throughout the Northeast during the 80s, and then other ministries as well. And so when we got to around 88, 89, it seemed very clear that I would need an organization, Chosen People, a fine organization, but an older organization, and I needed something to kind of be focused fully and completely on congregation planting. And so we started, we left that organization in 89. 88, 88,
it came down.
88, 89. Then we moved here. They had their headquarters in Charlotte. That's how we got here. And then I was president of that work of Chosen People Ministries until 96. And that's when we saw the need for an organization that would be focused on planting. We started Word of Messiah Ministries. If any of your viewers want to check us out at wordofmessiah.org, they can get all kinds of downloads and free help, all kinds of help in their witness and their walk. And so that's my checkered past. I brought my dear wife through all of that by the grace of God. And so we now, as you know, what you came to, we regularly hold conferences for new planters. We have a boot camp coming up in early September. If you go to our website, you can check out when the boot camp for brand new planters. If you think God may be calling you to such a work, we're here to help you. Our conferences will give you a very clear understanding what's needed to plant the congregation. And we follow that up by coaching and helping the planters. And then we have also a leadership conference coming up in November 4th and 5th for leaders all over, congregational leaders especially, as we build up that we want to see not only congregations planted, but see them developing and reproducing. And so we're here to help strengthen congregations because, Darryl, I know you understand what I'm talking about, that the healthy Messianic congregation is the most effective long-term witness into the Jewish community.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're about, what we've been doing, etc. And so that's what we're about even now, with conferences coming up and all kinds of things happening.
And it's been difficult the past couple of years with everything that's been going on, but things are finally starting to open up again. Right. So where will the leadership conference be held?
Yeah. Well, because of COVID, because of the pandemic, we could not meet on site, as you can understand. We immediately moved it to Zoom conferences. Right. We have Zoom conferences, so people in their PJs can be part of a conference. And we have wonderful conferences, more people involved than ever, people from all over the world, and they don't have to pay for airplane flights. They don't have to pay for hotel rooms, etc. So it became absolutely more convenient and helpful for people. So all through the pandemic, we've been training planters, and new congregations have been getting started. It's been just a glorious time. Now, a year ago, last summer, we had an on-site conference as well. But we find that the Zoom conferences are just so convenient and so helpful to so many more people. People from Africa, we had all kinds of people involved in these things. And so we really encourage people to be praying about it, pray for us, and for the work of God to go forward.
Amen. Now, you've written a number of books in regards to that, too. I actually have a few of them on my shelf behind me.
Oh, God bless you.
And that's all about planting congregations. That's certainly your passion and a very much needed element. You know, I find that with a lot of my experience in ministry, that there's a real emphasis on planting congregations and getting new ones started up, but not necessarily maintaining the existing ones. It's the new ones are sexier. It's a numbers game too, and you can put the notch on your belt, and not to be too cynical about it, but as you say, getting a healthy one to be established in the community is really the linchpin of winning Jewish people to faith, because I don't know what your experience is like, but Jews tend not to fall very easily. I mean, you know, back in the 60s and 70s, when the great revival started happening amongst our people, all of a sudden the light went on, and you know, Moish had a lot to do with this, of course, you know, going down to San Francisco, but even in New York before that, But now it's really challenging to get Jewish people to hear about the gospel. I got family members I've been working on, Kedena Horror for 24 years. They're not budging. So having that,
you understand that.
Having that healthy congregation in the community it's got to be a constant witness. It's got to be about the relationships.
Absolutely. And we spend quite a bit of time. I mean, we are absolutely delighted to work with congregations. In some cases, the old pioneers from back in the day, they were able to just open the door and it was a new thing and people flocked to them. They didn't have to actually do the work of ministry too much. But now we're doing a lot of training. We're finding a revitalization of some of the older ones and some restarts. Our boot camp is not only for people starting, but also for those who are restarting to kind of make sure they get off on the right foot and do the right things from the outset. So we're finding a lot of opportunity because I believe with all my heart that God wants there to be Messianic congregations. I was talking to a dear friend about this matter, and he said, well, aren't you just doing this to win Jews to faith? I said, well, I'm trying to win everyone to faith. I said, but if all the Jewish people were saved, I'd want them all in Messianic congregations in order to maintain their testimony that God is faithful to Israel in the Messiah. That God is faithful to Israel in the Messiah.
I don't think people understand how important that is, that I got saved in a Messianic synagogue and I would not have come to faith in a church. It just wouldn't have happened because that whole identity thing is so strong for so many of us that we don't want to give that up. And yet the church, the general church and the synagogue both tell you, if you believe in Yeshua, you're no longer Jewish.
Unfortunately. We had a man not very long ago come to faith who was on the board of the conservative synagogue. But his heart was hungry for what the traditional synagogue could not provide.
Yes.
And when we were studying together, Isaiah 53, of course, the light went on. It was an undeniable reality for him, and therefore came to faith. And then on Yom Kippur, his parents came to faith. So the Lord has been very gracious. But the point of the matter is the traditional synagogue, along with traditional churches, don't always provide the truth or the atmosphere. The churches might have the truth, but they don't provide the right atmosphere for Jewish people to feel comfortable. Jews who go to church have to adapt to a different culture. And if you go to synagogue, you don't hear about traditional synagogue. You don't hear about Messiah. And so this is something we find that I think is God wants Messianic congregations because Yeshua is the faithfulness of God to Israel. Yeshua is God's faithfulness to Israel and the nations. And so we want to make sure that God is seen as faithful. He has not forsaken the people whom he foreknew. And we want very much for people to understand this and be praying for these matters and praying for the Lord's work to continue in this regard.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, that's really exciting. And I was immensely blessed by the conference that I went to that you held in Tampa. Got a lot of great information out of that. Came back with some of your books. Be careful when you go to Sam's conferences. Your wallet will depart with its contents very quickly.
I beg your pardon.
Good thing. Amen.
I beg your pardon.
But you'll come home with some great material.
Well, okay then. Yeah, listen, let me just mention on that point. My wife is working on her 5th book. And so she has really made an impact. And I want to just make mention of this. She's made a great impact upon the Messianic women in the Messianic movement. And let me tell you why this is important. when we plant congregations, we do training in this area because we want there to be a strong women's ministry in the congregation. Because in fact, in the traditional synagogues, the women's ministry, the sisterhood as such, is really the muscle of the traditional synagogue. And
They
so
make it run.
And so therefore, they notice when there is a strong sisterhood in the Messianic congregation. Therefore, it becomes an evangelistic opportunity, because the women's ministry profile the fact to the women in the synagogues that Yeshua is the Messiah. And so it becomes quite an opportunity for women. And my wife's ministries, and she speaks at women's conferences, and her books are just very, very popular. And so pray, for the women's ministries as well. She deals with the women, and I get whatever's left. But my materials,
I understand that well.
My materials have some value too. So the issue of discipleship. So I've written materials that are really, everything I write is for the Messianic movement. I'm kind of desperate about this, to leave it better than I found it. That we might leave to our children and grandchildren a healthier movement for them to further in the work of God. And so materials, I've got a lot of materials on discipleship and evangelism. And also I have materials on planting. Now, what have also developed, Darryl, is that we found in order to have a stronger congregation, once they are planted, how do you have a strong? Well, here's a secret I want to share with everybody. The only way to have a stronger congregation, healthier congregation, is that you need to have healthier families, because a congregation is merely a group of families that get together. If you want a strong Messianic congregation, you need strong Messianic families. So in light of that fact, we now have Messianic marriage seminars. Can you go over there and get my book? It's on the shelf inside this cabinet here. We have Messianic marriage seminars, conferences for couples to come, and they get strengthened, and they build up the communities that they're in. It's just a delightful thing, because if you're going to have a strong congregation, you must have spiritually strong families. And so we have those things coming up. We have one of those in October. For those who are interested, we have you can go to our website, wordofmessiah.org, and you can go to conferences, the button conferences, and you can see the marriage conferences as well as the other conferences that we hold as well. Yeah.
I think the marriage conferences came out of much counseling that he does. Of course, he does marital counseling.
I call it discipleship.
Right. If a couple wants to get married, but it's not just a couple of weeks. It's like 6 months. And out of all that counseling and ministering to couples, he developed this amazing book, Messianic Marriage Matters.
Yeah. And so
it's really a great book.
We're very thankful our materials are being used. We're very thankful for that fact. You find a lot of Messianic rabbis have that marriage book I wrote on their shelf. And I'm not sure. Did you ever hear of a man named Dr. Barry Leventhal? Leventhal. Yeah, he's up there in years, one of our great teachers in the Messianic movement, and professor in various seminaries over the many years. He had his own marriage ministry, and he gave a wonderful endorsement. I'm very thankful to God, because he found the value of this book to be so helpful for marriages. And so because you mentioned it before, and rightly so, Darryl, that the relationships in the congregation are how we actually have a testimony, because if you love one another, this is how they'll know we're his disciples, his Talmudim. That our love for one another, our relationships are our strongest testimony to those who are looking. Now, of course, we do everything messianically in a Jewish way, but we want to make sure that the message is about Messiah and his great love. This is vital for our communities. Yeah, and next week, by the way, I think that you're aware, next week, this is my newest book. This is a proof copy. You can see by the line going through it. Okay, the line going through here. It's a proof copy. We'll have all, they're being published right now on Messiah in the End Times. Messiah in the End Times. And let me tell you, this was the book I never wanted to write. Because I've always thought that eschatological end times matters are very secondary. And therefore, I wanted to deal with what's primary. Well, that was all well and good until so many people, I found them majoring in the minors with fear tactics, all the frightening things that they were teaching, fear mongering. And so I felt we needed to have a book of hope. We have a blessed hope, Darryl, and we need to be a people of hope, not fear. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind. Second Timothy 1:7. And so the issue of hope, of our blessed hope especially, is what should characterize us as we face the world around us and look forward to his blessed his coming. So this is why I wrote this book, to counteract all the fear mongering that was disturbing not just the peace, but distracting from the message of Messiah and the good news. So that's where that.
And with Revelation and Daniel being so metaphorical in its imagery, you can slice it and dice it so many different ways, and many people have. I mean, there's all kinds of opinions out there about what it means, and some of them are pretty far-fetched. So, giving hope in all of that while still being true to the text, I think is very important. So that's exciting. So you're going to be presenting that through the Basora Institute and broadcast right here on the Lamb Network, and that is a week this Sunday.
That's right. July 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. July 10th. And by the way, it's just open to everyone. There's no cost involved. And so I would encourage everyone to tell their friends about it if they're interested. Let me tell you what is significant here. The two things that I made sure would be the key underpinnings of this book, and what I think is the underpinnings for our life. One has to do with the finished work of Messiah. We must understand his finished work. That the finished work of Messiah is the perfect work of God for everyone who believes. And then the second thing that is significant and that I emphasize has to do with the place of Israel in the plan of God.
Yes.
When we think about the future, it is very Israel-centric. And if you understand that puts a lot of the pieces of prophecy in its place. When you don't understand that, it gets confusing for people. But you have to remember the faithfulness of God to Israel. This is key for the future as well. If we deal with the issue of the tribulation, its purpose is to bring Israel to trust in Yeshua the Messiah. And following that, the second coming to establish the kingdom is the kingdom of Israel, Acts 1:6. And so it's Israel-centric as we look forward to the future. So those are the two elements that I really emphasize in my book.
And
Yeah.
there's not a lot of that out there. So that's exciting that this
No, not
resource
at
is now
all.
available.
No, most people end up. You can maybe tell from the books behind me as well. I'm a student of the Word. I love to read. I'm very well acquainted with the teachings of others as well. But I found that many times they deal with end times teaching apart from the finished work of Yeshua and apart from the centricity of Israel in the plan and purposes of God. Now, my wife's next book, which is really exciting, I can't wait for her to get it done finally, has to do with Yeshua as the healer of Israel and the healer especially of women, and how important that is to the redemptive program of God. I mean, it's just enlightening what she's written about, the fact that the whole redemptive program came through a bunch of dead wombs. I mean, no one can have kids.
Yes.
And so God had to do healing of those dead wombs to have an Isaac and to have, a Jacob. All of these things were miraculous on the healing of women. All the way through the Bible, the healing of women becomes so important to the redemptive program of God. I can't wait till that book is done. Yeah. I'm going to get a signed copy.
Are
Maybe.
you? Oh, good for you.
I hope so.
Play your cards right there.
You know, I just finished writing my first book, and we're right in the final stages of edit. And my son says to me the other day, "Am I going to get a copy?" I said, "No, you're not allowed to read it."
What's it on, the Song of Solomon?
No, that's not what it's about.
We joke about that because the rabbis
I'm not
did not
qualified
permit
to write
young
on that,
people-
believe me.
The rabbis did not permit young people to read the Song of Solomon until they were age of maturity. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well,
Anyway.
he's 12 now,
Yeah.
bar mitzvah next year. So,
Wow.
everybody's.
Wow,
I
congratulations.
know, right?
Mazel tov, mazel tov. Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
just wonderful. Yeah.
We're going to bar mitzvah him next year, and he'll probably be looking at his mother straight in the eye by then.
Woo, woo.
Wow.
He's getting big. Very good. Praise
He
the
is.
Lord for that.
Yes.
Yeah. By the way,
Amen.
for those who have an interest in messianic materials, and I guess if they're your viewers, they probably would. I would mention a couple of other books as well. My wife has several books, which I highly recommend. They are used in women's ministries around the world. One book is called Honoring God, and it's taken from Titus chapter 2 about women mentoring other women. Honoring God, and that can be gotten. All these can be gained
At the website.
at our wordofmessiah.org website. You can go to Amazon, but they charge too much. Go to wordofmessiah.org for your best deal. And so that book, and in regards to the book on the Jewish wedding that you wrote.
I did a book called Eternally Desired. It goes through the 4 steps of the Jewish wedding and how Yeshua fulfills it. I find that in women's ministry, the malady that we all face is the lack of esteem, a lack of value, women feeling less than mostly. And I don't think it's, I think it's across the board. But Eternally Desired is really a book to show us our value and how much our beloved loves us. And it's written with that in mind. So it's a great study and very uplifting. So.
You can see why she's so popular. See, I have to write twice as many books because she's so popular. So this is my plight in life.
I know.
But let me just mention, for those who are viewing, if you go to the website and to the bookstore, you'll see a lot of materials there. Some of the materials are so especially written to give a kind of structure to the Messianic movement. I wrote a book called The Israel Factor, In that book, I go through what is taught in seminary, the major doctrines or teachings that are taught in seminary, and I show how each of these doctrines become much more fuller, much more meaningful when we factor Israel back in, because many of the doctrines that we conservative evangelicals hold to, even as Messianic Jews, were developed by people who did not believe in a future for Israel at all. And
Reformed
so I
theology.
show how, pardon me?
Reformed theology.
Reformed supersessionism, Reformed theology.
Yep.
And so I go through it showing how each one of the things we believe become enhanced, really become meaningful in light of the fact of factoring Israel back into the plan of God for each of those areas. I find that to be a very helpful book for the Messianic movement. Lately, my other book I came out with not too long ago is The Mysterious Parables in Matthew 13, which are misunderstood unless you understand two things: that Israel is in focus, to understand the parables that Yeshua said are mysteries, and secondly, to understand that the reason they are mysteries because the kingdom of heaven is distorted because the king has been rejected. And so with the king rejected, the parables he teaches is how we can live victoriously through this age, even with a rejected king and a distorted kingdom. And so those are some materials I've written recently that might be helpful to your viewers as well.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, there's no shortage of good stuff. So if you go to wordofmessiah.org, you can check out really the bookstore that
another
that
book
Sam and Miriam.
Yeah, this
sorry, go ahead.
Messianic Discipleship is a book that we use, and it's a very basic book on discipleship. If you're looking to disciple a new believer or someone who needs to be rediscipled, it's a great book. It's interactive and
I think it's something you're aware of, Darryl, but many of our viewers may not be aware of how so few people in the body of Messiah in general are not discipled. They're merely acculturated. They've learned to fit into a believing culture, but have never been grounded and rooted in the word and the faith. And so our materials are meant to help believers get stronger, to be more victorious in their lives as his disciples.
Well, I think that in part that's because of the program-oriented focus of many of the churches, and it is my personal conviction, you can do with it what you wish, but that's a big part of what I think God brought about COVID for, is to shut that down and to realign. He told me a week and a half ago, I need to start praying for realignment. And we saw the alignment of all the planets last Friday, and that's when Roe versus Wade fell. So there's a huge realignment that God is doing right now. And I think we've got to get back to, and I've done teachings on this too, on what the first century disciple was like. And I heard in there was a leadership organization I belonged to for several years, and they said, people spell love Time. That is how, and if you look at Yeshua, he spent time with his people. He interacted with them. I remember years ago when I was being discipled, we would go out and play baseball on Sundays. We'd have a bunch of Jews that we would get together and have a pickup game with, and then we'd go out for lunch after, and we would talk about things. And I think a lot of that has been lost in the culture that we have. And I think God wants to realign that. He wants to bring it back. And so your resources, your material is so helpful. I have the Messianic Discipleship. I have Messianic Wisdom. They're wonderful books. And this new material you're coming out with just sounds so exciting. Already my wallet is starting to jump in my pocket.
All right, gewalt. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, my brother, I'm very thankful for the privilege of being able to be on your broadcast. I trust that the Lord has been honored and that he's well pleased. But I also pray that the Lord will continue to bless and multiply your work. Amen. And strengthen you and your dear wife.
Thank you.
And your wonderful bar mitzvah son that's coming around. This is glorious. How exciting. Yes. Yeah. Yeshua, when he was 12 years old, most of our viewers may be aware in Luke chapter 2 of how Yeshua was left in Jerusalem by his parents, left at the temple. Well, at 12 is when they're preparing for bar mitzvah. And so they're taken around during the festivals to know how to conduct themselves through all the festivals. So at 13, you could then go through bar mitzvah. And so your son has a wonderful year of preparation coming up. May it be a great blessing as you prepare him even more fully for that exciting day when he becomes bar mitzvah as well.
He has no idea what's about to hit him. Anyway, well, the hour has come to an end, and Sam and Miriam, thank you so much. It has been just a pleasure getting reconnected with you. It's been too long. We look forward to the program with Basora on July 10th at 3 p.m. right here on the Messianic Lamb Network. So Sam will regale you about his new book. Yes. And Miriam, we look forward to your book too.
Yes.
So once again, it's been tremendous, and we thank you so much. And so that brings us to a close of another episode of Superheroes of the Messianic Faith. And I think we can truly say that Sam and Miriam have been trailblazers for us. And thank you so much for your contributions. So on that note, we trust this has been an encouragement to you. And continue to pray for the Nadlers, and make sure you stay tuned because there's lots more good stuff coming. So Shalom Aleichem, everybody. And we will look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Superheroes of the Messianic Faith. God bless everybody, and we'll talk to you next time.